thank you all for staying. First, let's give another round of applause for our choreographers. I have with me Helen Pickett and Alessandro Ceruto. First of all, breathtaking. This afternoon I want to talk a little bit about, as choreographers, how choreography is shifting and changing to match the times, right? And I want to start with you, obviously I want to start with you, Helen, because you created through Zoom, and now it's been translated or transferred to the stage. Can you talk a little bit about the first process and then how you're reimagining it to be live and in person with actual space?
Thank you, first of all, and it's a pleasure to share the stage with you and with you. Thank you. Home Studies was created in the homes, in my home and in the dancers' homes. And at that time, it was about May when I came to the idea. And even then, I was feeling that we needed some love, we needed connection, we were missing these things, and joy. So, and then I asked 3 dancers that I'd worked with for so many years, because I thought if I'm gonna make something on Zoom, I need to have familiarity to, you know, I was gonna sound, it's kind of an ego place, but to finish the sentences, right? Because we've worked together before, right? So I asked these 3 dancers and they said yes, and then I had the great fortune to have the composer donate the music, and also the cinematographer donated his time, Ernesto Galan, and the composer Peter Salem. So it was really a project of love, born of community. So that was it. That became the overriding theme for me in creating 12 films during this time, was community. And bringing people together and having people be able to share something even if we can't share together in a space. So then Pamela asked me, actually Boston was approached, and Miko suggested that this be translated, you know, if I wanted to do this, could I imagine it being translated to the stage? So I said, I will, I'll imagine that, and I did, let's say, expand it movement-wise, but not too much, because there's something about the intimacy of it. And then I added the first piece to create more of a community for this part, and I put my call into the last section to also finish with an idea of community. That was the overriding theme. I wanted to stay with that.
How did the conversation with the dancers change from that initial moment? Because it was such an emotionally fraught period of time, we're all locked in. What were those conversations like when you're creating the film versus where we are now when we're actually able to be together, touch, and engage with one another?
There was a need, I have to say, when I first started with Zoom, I kept reaching toward the camera. Literally, I was like, oh no, that doesn't work. And I talked way too loud because you're trying to reach through, right? So that idea of getting to know, you know, if you will, it's another proscenium place to reach beyond. And that's how I treated these films. It was the same thing, which is in much of my work, how do I transcend the stage to touch proprioceptively the audience's skin? So I think in the beginning it was born of, we just need to work. And we need to feel something together in whatever capacity we can. And it was a very collaborative, a lot of fun, a lot of joy, a lot of laughter together. And then when this came, and again, I rehearsed on Zoom to recreate this, you know, the stage, when we actually knew that we were going to be together here, and that one rehearsal we had over there because of the hurricane, it felt like it was an extension. It didn't feel like we'd been apart from each other. And that's an amazing, beautiful thing to remember, that space and this let's say virtual place does not need to disconnect us.
Right. I think it speaks to our adaptability as humans. Like, we learn how, like, our synapses just connect in a different way to make us understand it. So Alejandra, I think that your piece is really interesting, especially now, because for me, it like I said in the pre-talk, it really evokes the sensation of touch, togetherness, community. I think also for me, I see much in when people connect as much as when they miss people. And I'm wondering if, because this was not choreographed during COVID, or was it? Right, so has it changed for you, like emotionally and where you are in the space? When you're watching it, are you seeing it differently?
I am definitely. It's very interesting for me to hear every individual's thoughts on the piece, because that thing that you saw is something that I see now that you're saying it, but it's not something that I particularly have had in mind in the rehearsals or when I created the piece back in 2013. But this particular performance has been incredibly special for me, because the dancers have come from different companies and they've come together to perform. So I came here to the Pillow a week ago to work with dancers that I had never worked before, and most of the work they did it on their own. They did it by watching a video, which is not the most fun thing to do for a dancer. No, it really isn't. So they came very prepared. They came beyond prepared. It was not just they had learned the steps and they stopped there. They really looked at the video, studied the video, and just in this last week we worked together. And yes, actually we did talk a lot about connecting, and I mentioned very often to them, maybe because of the lack of connection throughout the past 2 years, that like look at him or touch her or touch him, and I kept hearing, actually saying myself that to the dancers. It's very interesting.
I think I was recognizing it because I mean we've seen dance, we've been around dancer, you understand what that is, but the lack of appreciation that you don't realize you have for it until it's gone, that the simplest thing becomes huge. I mean, I remember when I ventured out from the bunker, I had difficulty making eye contact with people, like in conversation, because I had been on Zoom, I had been in front of a screen for so long. So there is that interesting thing that when we enter this space, how are we changed, altered? Like how is our lens shifted from our experience? Do you have anything to?
I think that for me, I was very lucky. There was I did not get COVID. My family member, so I'm speaking from that place. But the appreciation you speak of collaboration and being with, was greatly anchored. That's where a lot of my work has centered anyhow, but it was a further commitment that this is my way forward, and this is this collaboration with the dancers, because our work was greatly collaborative, and I've worked so often with Boston Ballet, and there's that thread there, that knowing, but that is something that dancers are remarkable in their place of generosity and graciousness and giving. And that is always, and was always, and that continued. And to keep investigating that aspect of our art, I believe that is also a way forward in connecting in the ballet art form in general. That reach is part of connection. That reach is a part of generosity. That reach is a part of inclusion. So I feel like a lot of these ideas, because there was so much time, we had a lot of time in our bunkers, and a lot of those thoughts I was like, yeah, this is, for me, the path into and forward and with.
So Alejandra, you mentioned the idea that most of the dancers had learned from the video, right? And you worked with them periodically through video. I think that this period of time in the cultural shift that is global, in the cultural shift that's happening in the field of ballet, there's so much more agency given to dancers. Bubbles allowed for dancers to work out of rank. How did that affect your working, both in this context and anything else that you have been working on? Did you see a difference?
Well, perhaps contrary to what the feeling that you had during this time, or what that I sense you had, it was very hard for me to create during the pandemic. I didn't. I did one video creation at home with my partner. It was commissioned by the Work and Process at the Guggenheim. But beyond that, I was asked to make something, but I couldn't. It was not something that I felt I had the will. I felt terrible, and I saw some artists really creating and making something great out of nothing. And I was here, someone that I've been choreographing for so long, and I found myself at home thinking I'm missing out, but I'm really not inspired to do anything. So that was very hard for me, and right now I just feel very lucky to be here, speaking on a stage, and what was it? A couple of weeks ago, I saw a performance, and I was just happy. No, there wasn't a couple of. It was about 2 months ago. I saw that for the first time a performance, and I was just incredibly grateful to just see something, regardless of how I felt about it, or how my opinion on my taste. Is everything that became absolutely secondary. It's just the fact that someone can put something together on stage after this hard time. It's very hard. It's very hard. So I'm very thankful to be here, and I'm not looking forward to going back to video at all. I mean, I feel this time has pushed us to find new ways, including myself. And I did a new work for Pacific Northwest Ballet that was only performed for video. But even though when I choreographed with them, my form was thinking this will be performed live. It wasn't. This is not gonna just live in a video. This will be performed live. And I also did a work in Prague, and that was this for a live performance. So I feel every artist and every individual had a different feeling, and I think every sometimes we feel bad because we see other people doing other things, but everybody has to sort of digest and take things their own way. Right?
I think it's really interesting because as dancers specifically in that art, we're so hard on ourselves, and it's so external. Everything, our gauges are external in comparative, right? It's in comparison. What am I? Two turns, 3 turns, jump high, higher, right? So what I'm hearing, and I think it's really interesting, is that, and I hope that we can have compassion for ourselves in whatever form that we went through this trauma together, is that to get a level of clarity of what drives you, right? And then for me, I think then the integrity to stand by that, right? So the idea that you're an in-person choreographer, you can stand by that, and your work speaks to that, right? And that's what you are. And Helen, you can go I can do I can do it. I can move. I can shift. And that's fine, right? But I think that there's a beauty in even that discovery, right? We learned something. I'd like to take a question. So this is a question about the dancers learning remotely, and then wanting to to explain how you begin to put it together, assemble it when they're all in person.
So when Pam asked me first, she suggested to create a new work with the 3 different companies, but there were several challenges, and one of them was time. We had 1 week to create, and that's very little time. Usually, I need 4 to 5 weeks to make something, unless I make 3 minutes of choreography. So that's why I suggested to Pam to bring Second to Last, which is the format are duets. And that's how within the piece, they all dance the same piece, but they were able to, they don't really ever cross together. You know, they share the stage for a moment, but their sections are completely individual. So it's a piece that it was very easy in that way to put it together, because they're not dancing all the dances at the same time, which it would have been amazing. But the partners, they learned together. Yes, they lived or they met in the studio. But the Boston Ballet dancers, they had their duets. The Houston Ballet, they have their duets, and the Pacific Northwest Ballet, they have their duets. That's how it happened.
So it was separate but equal. Anybody else have a comment? Or so this is a question about how performing outdoors, al fresco, might change the work, either as you imagined it, created it. And Helen, I want you to talk about that, because yours was literally created in apartments.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah, this is a dancer. I mean, it is a huge part of the performance, right? The bombastic expanse and glory of this nature it really figures into the show. So I kept thinking that instead of like the small apartments, we were in this giant bay window, you know, and it was behind the dancers. And I do recognize that the intimacy of home studies, because they were made for films in small places and filmed in a small place, there is some of that kind of intimacy is, let me say, lost on the stage. But what is gained is their energy has expanded to the edges of the stage, even though the let's say the place that is taken is not grand and large, but the energy is extended. And I recognize that with Michael's solo and the duet and the trio, there just seems to be it breathes differently. That was the biggest.
Well, for me, it's completely different to be outdoors and in a regular stage. It's very, very different. So I feel that as an audience member, when I go to a performance that is outdoors, I already come with a different mindset than when I go indoors, because this is beautiful. It's also hot or not. And sometimes it's windy, sometimes it's cold, sometimes there are birds, sometimes there are insects. So those are beautiful things, and they're also distractions. So I feel it also depends on which work you're talking about, like we're discussing, or with I think there are works that would not work outdoors. As well as I think there are some other works that might work much better outdoors. So it depends. I think it depends on the work. But the theater, the indoor theater, in my opinion, gives you more control over the elements. So it is easier to create, in my opinion, magic.
I want to thank you all for joining us for this POChat. I want to thank you, Helen, Alejandro. Thank you for your work and your honesty and your candor, and for what you've bestowed and are bestowing on these young dancers.
Thank you.
Enjoy your afternoon.